This is the all-new 2024 Ranger Raptor, and it's the last piece in our mid-size truck puzzle because we've already looked at Tacomas and GMC Canyons, Colorados of the world, and we're going out with a bang. We're taking this thing to northern Colorado to hit up some sand dunes, really where it belongs. But before we do that, we're going to do our usual, take a look outside. Inside, I'm going to show you some of the features in this vehicle. We're going to throw a bike in the back and see how usable this bed is. And last but not least, we're going to take it out on the road before we take it to the sand dunes. Cast your vote below for the best looking mid-size truck. To my eyes, it's interesting to compare this Raptor version to the regular base Ranger because I think the regular Ranger is kind of the most pedestrian looking of all the mid-size trucks. Even the base Tacomas and the base Canyons and Colorados look really good, but this really cranks it up a notch. Of course, with the Raptor version, you're getting much wider fenders because this vehicle has a wider track, a different grille, the 33-inch tires, which are more akin to what you see on the TRD side than the Chevy side because the ZR2 has 35s. And you also get things like these side steps that maybe double as rock sliders, although they are a lot closer to the ground than what we just saw with the Canyon. And last but not least, we can't forget the color. This is referred to as shelter green. Enthusiasts rejoice because in the other vehicles that we've looked at, Tacoma, Canyon, Colorado, those are all 4 cylinders of some variation. This is a turbocharged 6-cylinder. This is their 3-liter version, and it makes 405 horsepower and 430 pound-feet of torque. That is the highest horsepower of any of these trucks, and of course it is the quickest to 60 accordingly. It is paired with their 10-speed transmission, which is in a lot of their products I haven't got along with super well in the past, so we'll be curious to see what that's like out on the road, as well as the power band. Last but not least, of course, we always talk about fuel economy: 16 city, 18 highway. Let's get my main complaint about the Ranger Raptor out of the way just immediately, and that is the interior. My biggest complaint is the cheapness, quality, and overall design, frankly, of this interior. It's just full of scratchy plastics, and I don't know if you can see that, but this center console gives quite a bit. You have this cheap bezel around the center screen with these red accents that just looks like it's out of the dollar store, frankly. Even this shifting mechanism here is very cheap feeling and also just doesn't have the same satisfyingness of a lever that you get in something like the Canyon or Colorado, and just doesn't give you a sense of being worth $50,000 or $60,000 like this truck is. When you're spending that much money on these vehicles, you want something decent, and I think that is the biggest letdown here. The sound system is B&O, but in terms of B&O sound systems that I've heard, it's not very good, certainly not as good as the other trucks that we've been in. Now, in terms of usability, it's not as bad as I think just kind of the cheapness factor. This center screen here operates very similar to the F-150 Lightning that we were in recently, where it just has kind of an app-based menu structure. It's pretty easy to get along with, which is nice. Although, one major benefit is having these HVAC controls physical on the bottom, so you don't have to go digging through screens. Although to turn your heated seats and heated steering wheel, you do have to go through the screen menu structure. So in terms of that usability, it's not so bad. Some other benefits of this compared to some of the other models: primarily, this actually is relatively quiet on the road. It's not nearly as quiet as that GMC that we were in. That seems to be the best in terms of mid-sized trucks for quietness, but this one isn't so bad. Road noise, wind noise, not so bad. But these seats are actually the highlight for me in here. I think out of all the seats that we sat in, these are the best. I did a 6-hour round trip to the dunes, as you're going to find out, and I was very comfortable in these. They have lumbar support, and they also frankly look pretty cool, which is important when you're spending $60,000 on a truck. Now, the last thing to talk about is the rear seats, and I've really been, talking about these a lot with the Tacoma, the GMC Canyon, and they're kind of all very similar. There's just not a lot of space back there. At 6'1", I can't even come close to sitting behind myself in any level of comfort. My knees are jammed up against the seat in front of me. And that's kind of pretty much indicative of all the vehicles in this category, although it must be said that the Canyon had the most space, even though it wasn't a whole ton. This is pretty bad, frankly. So if you do actually want to put people back there, it's a bit of a tough sell. Before we take this thing out on the road, let's throw a bike in the back and see what kind of features they have in the bed.
Let's talk bed features before our bike test. First, like the rest of the midsize trucks we've looked at, you get a power inverter so you can plug in your 120 volt items into the bed. I lamented the loss of the 6-foot bed option in the Canyon, and actually Ford has done the same thing here. If you want a midsize truck with a 6-foot bed, you're gonna have to get a Tacoma, although all the off-road models specifically are short bed only. And finally, my mountain bike fits great in the truck bed, both with the tailgate closed or hanging off the back like most people will do. As always, if you enjoy the bike test and the rest of the video, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button so you don't miss future videos.
Okay, before we take this thing off-road in the sand where it needs to be, we need to figure out what it's like on-road, because frankly, that's how most people are going to be using it most of the time. It's interesting to compare this to the Tacoma that we were just in, as well as the AT4X or ZR2, whatever you'd like to call it. The big difference here is going to be the setup of the suspension. All these vehicles have a great suspension. Really, the ZR2 and this vehicle with the Fox live valve, they are above, in my opinion, of the Tacoma that we did, the off-road. Now, if you start looking at the TRD Pro, it starts to get a little bit closer, but the spool valve shocks in the AT4X and the live valve in this are just going to be above what you have in the TRD. Now, the biggest difference when we compare this to the ZR2 is really just the comfort aspect. Now, in some ways, this has less body control than the ZR2. Is actually softer sprung, so there's more body movement in the turns on road. But what that equates to for most people is a slightly more comfortable ride. It's not as stiff when you go over bumps. So I think probably a lot of people might prefer this, but in a certain sense, the AT4X kind of handles better on road, believe it or not. Even though that has bigger tires, it's on 35-inch tires, it just is so planted with those spool valve shocks, and this has a lot more lean to it. Now, that is, of course, because it is set up for Baja rather than rock crawling, as you're going to see here in a minute. But either way, both trucks, the ZR2 rides very well. I will say, compared to the Tacoma rides the most truck-like. And what I mean by that is when you go over bumps mid-corner, it kind of does that truck body on frame shake thing. These trucks, the Raptor and the ZR2, AT4X, I keep using different names, they just don't. They ride so much better, almost closer to SUVs, which is quite interesting to me. Now, the engine, you'll hear it a little more when we get and do some sand driving, but it does have more character, of course, than the 4 cylinders in the other vehicles. It makes really good power, and I think my biggest surprise is the fuel economy. You know, you would think a 4-cylinder would get better fuel economy than a 6-cylinder. Now, the Tacoma, in my experience, got the best fuel economy, but the ZR2 or AT4X actually got less fuel economy than this. So that's kind of funny to me. I don't know what to say. I think that's mostly to do with, there's a Hunter on the side of the road here. I think that's mostly to do with the fact that the AT4X is on 35-inch tires. I bet if you put this on 35s, it would probably get the same fuel economy. But before, I was just ripping around in the sand. I was getting about 16 miles to the gallon, which is slightly better, or pretty close to being on par, frankly, with the AT4X. Now, let's just do the thing that everyone wants. Let's take it to the sand and see what this thing is like on a fun weekend. All right, here we go. Now we're in the Raptor environment. This is North Sand Hill. Yeah, baby. I finally got the traction control figured out here. This is in northern Colorado, basically almost all the way to Wyoming. And this, my friends, is what the Raptor is all about. Now, I will say this thing is way more fun in two-wheel drive mode, but there's kind of deep sand here, and you really need to be I'm in 4 high right now. We're gonna go through a little bit of trails here. Managed to come here early, camped here last night, and beat the crowd essentially. I was up, at 6, sun's up, crested the mountain at 7, and I was out here. No one's out here. This is the move. Basically, this is the kind of crowd that is up late, they're out here. They got their glow sticks on their side-by-sides, and they're ripping around here, which is awesome. But for me, I'm getting here early, having this place all to myself, and having good visibility so I can see people coming. But this thing, man, look, this is what you buy a Raptor for. When I had that ZR2 or, the Canyon version, whatever you'd like to call it, whoa, Bunkin' Bronco. That thing is more about slow off-roading, kind of with rocky trails. If you want to go rock crawling, get one of those. But look, if you have access to a desert, not everybody does, right? If you live in the Midwest where I'm from, if you live in the South, maybe the ZR2 probably makes more sense because those are just kind of the trails that you have. It's very few, like unless you live out west, there are some areas in Michigan that have sandy dunes that you can go on. You kind of just got to be like practical with what area you're by, because as much as you may love to have a Raptor in the Midwest, I just don't think it's going to be as useful as if you had it out here. So let's talk suspension, let's talk engine, because that's really what you're getting here. All right, the suspension. We already talked about it's softer than the ZR2, and that's apparent on the road. It's apparent out here. It has more body lean, but man, it does a really good job of soaking up these bumps. I have this R mode here where I can press on the steering wheel, and basically it sets it up into my custom mode. So you can choose these live valve dampers in off-road mode or normal mode. And then you can also choose your steering comfort, in terms of how much effort you need. You can choose your exhaust sound. I'm in Baja mode right now, which is the loudest. So it gives you really cool customizability, and I like that it's on the steering wheel. It doesn't persist, so every time you get in the car, you kind of have to press it, which is whatever. But the second part here is the engine. The engine is really what makes this kind of thing possible. So you don't lose that much displacement. Ooh, there's like a drop off here. You don't lose that much displacement in the Colorado, although it is a 4-cylinder. Oh boy. The 4-cylinder is 2.7 liter in the Colorado. This is a 3 liter, and it is a 6-cylinder, so only 0.3 of a liter more. Oh boy. Ooh, I thought maybe we could jump that, but if you tried to get any speed, you would just plow directly into that. So it has slightly more character to it. It's not a great sound. It kind of sounds like a bunch of vuvuzelas, like a really loud vuvuzela. But, it's a little more interesting than a 4-cylinder sound. And it just has good power. That's really what you're paying for here. The transmission is okay. I actually think I like the 8-speed in the Chevys more, but this one's not bad. We're kind of nitpicking there. But the power is really what gives you the ability to get after it, man. This is just an adult sandbox. If you are ever by northern Colorado, it's near Walden, Colorado, man, you got to come and do this. This is just so much fun. Yes, this would be better in a side-by-side. This isn't exactly the like most optimal vehicle for this, but come on, man. If you can have a car that can drive to and from work, and then on the weekends you can come out and do this, that's pretty freaking cool. That's pretty freaking cool. I like this thing a lot. I'm gonna do another video where I basically talk about the best truck that you could piece together from pieces of each vehicle, from the Tacoma, from the Colorado Canyon, from this. We're gonna make the ultimate vehicle, and then I'll also give my recommendations in terms of, you know, which one is my favorite, which one is probably right for you. Guys, if you made it this far in the video, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. This one has been a ton of fun to make, and you know, it's not a short drive out here. This is 3 hours from Denver, but well worth the time. Thanks again, guys. Consider hitting that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Let me give you a little tour here at North Sand Hill, OHV, and gonna take the Ranger Raptor tomorrow for a little rip around the sand dunes, but figured to camp out tonight. But check out my little camping setup here. Got my tarp. I took the stakes from my tent, and they happen to fit perfectly into the tailgate and up front. Then I got the old air mattress out because, you know, I don't want to rough it too much. And check this out. Pretty much all new trucks have 120 volt inverter. So I was able to pump this baby up. Be sleeping good tonight. 28 degrees tonight. Got a couple sleeping bags. Genius.